Software as a service, otherwise called SaaS, SaaS, is yet another cloud service model. It deals primarily with software that end users interface with. So it's software that's delivered over a network, and really what's happening is we are renting the use of that software over the network for a period of time. Now, because this isn't the underlying infrastructure supporting the software, we're not dealing with virtual machines and storage accounts and VNets, we have limited configuration options that are specific to the SaaS solution. And our use of the SaaS solution, and of course the resultant data, is kept isolated from other Microsoft Azure customers. So you could say that software as a service offerings then are a managed service because we aren't dealing with the underlying infrastructure. That is handled automatically for us. So the software is managed by the cloud service provider, the CSP, and there is also a service level agreement for each different SaaS offering. Now, the service level agreement applies to every cloud service. They're all different, and it outlines things such as expected uptime for that particular service, and that can feed into our high availability requirements. Let's take a minute to discuss shared responsibility in the Azure cloud and how it applies to software as a service. The cloud service provider, or the CSP, is responsible for the underlying supporting infrastructure. So the data center, the physical security related to that, as well as all the components, the physical hardware components like routers, switches, physical servers that will run virtual machines, storage arrays, making sure that's in a locked rack, all of that is the supporting infrastructure. It's a responsibility of the provider, in this case, Microsoft. Now also, the software that is running within virtual machines upon which our SaaS services are running, all of that software maintenance, patching, all of that is the responsibility of the cloud service provider. We, as cloud customers, do not have access to the underlying virtual machines that support SaaS solutions. So therefore, how could it be our responsibility? Tenant isolation of the configuration of the SaaS solution and the resultant data is kept separate between Azure customers or tenants. So again, that's the responsibility of Microsoft. As a cloud customer or tenant, our responsibility when using Azure SaaS solutions deals with configuring whichever options are available, the usage of that solution, which could include limiting access to it only over HTTPS, for example, and not allowing HTTP access. It also includes the responsibility of us as customers securing any sensitive data that might result from the use of a cloud SaaS solution, such as something basic like cloud-based email, and limiting the amount of sensitive documents that can be sent via email or requiring encryption when sending email outside of the organization. There are also times when an Azure software as a service solution will require on another cloud service model like platform as a service or PaaS. So an example would be if we have a SaaS app that has a reliance upon users and groups having already been provisioned to allow individual access to whatever that app allows access to. And so that means something like Azure Active Directory, where we might have provisioned users and groups already and set permissions at the user or group level. Normally, when you have a bunch of users with the same requirements, such as the same requirement to access a SaaS app, then we would put them in a group and set permissions at the group level. It's easier to manage at scale that way than individual user permissions. We might also, with examples such as Azure Active Directory, enable multi-factor authentication to enhance user sign-in security. That's not necessarily a function of SaaS, but rather of PaaS, the underlying platform as a service solution. And we might also enable single sign-on or SSO so that users authenticate once, a single time initially, after which when they access other SaaS apps, they don't keep getting prompted to enter the same credentials over and over. And if you look at a solution like Microsoft 365, formerly known as Office 365, it uses Azure Active Directory for users and groups. Even though it's a different type of interface than we would see directly in the Azure portal, that is actually what it's using. SaaS benefits include the accessibility of the SaaS solution for users from anywhere over a network using really any type of device. And that maps to the broad access generic cloud computing characteristic. The other thing to bear in mind is that, generally speaking, normally that there's no software that needs to be deployed on user devices to partake in a SaaS solution, because usually they can simply use a web browser to sign in and access the SaaS service. Now, in some cases, though, you might want to install a small helper app, maybe for enhanced functionality, or to allow a user to work in offline mode if the internet connection is severed, that type of thing. Another benefit of using SaaS is that most users are probably already familiar with using cloud services. They might not even know it's a cloud service. As an example, if you've got someone that's been using Outlook webmail for years, they're already using a SaaS solution. That's an example of SaaS. And so there's an easy transition then for users to use software as a service. Because it is a cloud computing environment, of course, we pay only for what we use, and we know that app accessibility is generally done using a web browser. So examples of SaaS solutions in a Microsoft Azure context would include Microsoft 365. Software developers might build customized line of business apps that are hosted in the cloud, and we might also have web applications in the form of app services hosted in the Microsoft Azure cloud.